When Bleach fans discuss the things they'd have liked to have seen done differently in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, one of the same moments comes up time and time again. And that's of course the battle between the Zero Division and the Schutzstaffel for the fate of the Royal Palace. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. In fact, for me, this is absolutely up there as one of the moments I want to see the anime expand on when it comes out in the future. Now, this is a battle for the very linchpin of the Bleach universe. We as readers have been told over and over that it is of vital importance that the Soul King be protected at all costs, lest all 3 worlds of Bleach be destroyed. And of course, it's the Zero Division's entire purpose to ensure that the king is protected. So when Yhwach and his Schutzstaffel finally invade the palace at the crux of the Thousand Year Blood War, I don't think it's unreasonable that we were expecting these guys, who are all hallowed captains, to kind of give it their all to defend what is essentially their life's purpose. What we got instead was a weirdly truncated, fragmented battle that was mostly set up and very little payoff, which in the end left us as readers with more questions than answers regarding the Zero Division's capabilities and their ZANPAKUTO. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the very little we know about the Zero Division's ZANPAKUTO in Bleach itself, and also speculate on what the other members' ZANPAKUTO might be, what their abilities might be, what their powers might be based on the evidence we have in the manga, again, what very little there is. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach videos just like this every single week. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, as well as it really does help support me and the channel as it gets us more, hopefully, exposure on the whole YouTube algorithm. And if you want to take that support for me another step further, if you like what I do here on this channel, we have a Patreon as well, where you can get videos like this one early, and you can support me over there for as little as $1 a month. All the names coming up on screen right now are people who did just that. They are supporting me over there on Patreon, helping me to bring you Bleach content like this every week, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. So a huge shout out to each and every one of you. Thank you guys so much. So when it comes to the mysterious Zero Division in Bleach, I actually like an awful lot of what we saw from these guys. I absolutely love their weird, eccentric, but ultimately totally unique character designs, which is something I valued an awful lot when a new character was introduced at such a late stage in the game. And to be honest, over 500 chapters deep into the story by the time these guys were introduced, I was always so impressed that Kubo was still able to concoct characters that looked absolutely nothing like anyone we had ever seen before in Bleach's massive cast. And the fact that the Zero Division managed to look wholly unique meant that they slotted nicely next to the already existing captains without stepping on any toes, while also lending them this sense of importance. I also really loved the Royal Palace as an ecosystem in Bleach. I thought that this new area was introduced really well, established in the lore nicely. I loved the layout, I loved the structure. I thought seeing Ichigo and Renji moving through the different palaces one at a time was a really cool way of doing a little training arc for them. It was awesome seeing how the different palaces reflected the different members of the Zero Division that they were representing at the time, and overall I thought this whole kind of mini arc did a great job of both training Ichigo and Renji while introducing and establishing the Zero Division in this universe. It was well paced and really enjoyable, ultimately just providing amazing world building. And the same can be said as well for the other thing I love about the Zero Division, which is the fact that to be promoted to that special squad, you have to have contributed to Soul Society's overall history. You have to be considered by the Spirit King to be an embodiment of Soul Society's history. I thought that was super unique, really, really cool, totally different to what I think many of us presumed before this arc, which was just, it was a power thing, that was how you got in there. But no, it was totally unique and really, really cool to see. And again, it helped to lend each of these individual characters a real sense of gravitas, a real sense of importance in the Bleach universe as a whole. I loved all of that. And what I didn't like quite as much was, again, the fact that we didn't really get to see these guys in a proper fight whatsoever. And again, it's just so strange. Their initial introduction in chapter 516 is heralded on the basis of Kyoraku saying that these 5 combined are more powerful than the entire Gotei 13. That immediately puts some kind of expectation in the reader's mind. Whether it was entirely true or not is very difficult to gauge, but I think many of us were definitely hoping for some kind of an awesome fight involving the Zero Division, especially since it seemed like the Quincy, being so efficient as they were as villains, would absolutely make it to the palace this time. And again, like I said, despite being a squad made up of just 5 incredibly influential, incredibly powerful captains, whose ZANPAKUTO alone should have been touchstone moments of excitement used for the reader, we get to find out so very little about their capabilities, about their ZANPAKUTO. But let's begin with the member of the Zero Division whose ZANPAKUTO we do actually get to learn basically through to completion, and that is the de facto leader of Squad Zero himself, Ichibei Hyosabe. Now, I've recently done a video on Ichibei's Bankai Shirafude Ichimonji, but I just want to reiterate that if we could only see one member of the Zero Division's powers, which is what happened, I'm glad it was Ichibei. And I think that's quite obviously why Kubo went the route he did. He didn't have the time to truly flesh out all 5 members, so he went with the most ancient, the most powerful, and the most influential of them all. And I think that was the right call to make, although I would have obviously liked to have seen a proper fight in general. But regarding his ZANPAKUTO, we get to see basically the entire thing. Ichimonji in its base sealed form takes the form of a big calligraphy brush which Ichibei can actually use to write with, and he can use it in battle as well. Every time he swings the brush, it splashes ink all over the place, and anything this ink touches and covers loses its name. This is a really, really cool ability, very conceptual, very weird, and just something I would totally expect to see from the Zero Division, particularly someone, again, as influential in the annals of history as Ichibei. When Ichibei activates his Shikai with the release command Blacken Ichimonji, you again get to see its immense power. And again, I've talked about this briefly before, but what's so cool about Ichibei is that it again kind of feels a bit meta. Obviously, it's a black and white hand-drawn manga series. Ichibei is using this calligraphy pen to control all black in the universe, so Kubo really gets to use ink in a very cool, very creative way, creating like these jet black speech bubbles for Ichibei. You know, you get the sense that Ichibei could author the Bleach universe, which I think is just such a weighty, lofty power for it to seem like he has, but that's why it comes across so well. That's why his ZANPAKUTO feels so effective. In terms of his Shikai, not a lot changes. The brush head at the end of the calligraphy brush in its base form is now replaced with a hefty, flat blade, but the rest of the sword, I guess you can call it, remains the same. But the way this changes is quite simple. It still splashes ink all over the place, but now anything he cuts with the blade doesn't cut flesh, but cuts names. Meanwhile, his Bankai Shirafude Ichimonji is used so blasé that it feels like it's nothing to him to use it, and again, I really liked that as well. But now the blade at the top of the weapon is replaced entirely with what looks like almost like an open white ink pot, which is now leaking white ink everywhere. He can swirl it around. It follows the blade itself. It trails behind him. And when he activates his Bankai, it creates a big white ring above his head. And basically all Shirafude Ichimonji does is allow Ichibei to rename anything he has taken a name from. Again, giving him that almost godlike author power. And that's Ichibei's ZANPAKUTO. It's very simplistic, but I think that makes it more effective. It's quite easy to grasp, and therefore it's easy to grasp the repercussions this ability has as well. And that's about it for Zero Division ZANPAKUTO that we really know in the series, which is absolutely crazy when you think that there are 4 more characters waiting to be fully fleshed out, and that's a big shame. But let's start with the next character who I feel like we maybe know the most about, but a lot of this will be speculative moving forwards. I will indicate when I am speculating, although I think it will be fairly obvious, as we just really don't know anything at all about really any of these guys Zanpakuto. Now, Nimaya Oetsu is the Blade God. He is the creator of the Asauchi and therefore, by proxy, the creator of the Zanpakuto in general. And this means he was always going to be a bit weird when it came to having a Zanpakuto. Does he even own a Zanpakuto of his own? I would assume so, because he must have some kind of, inner spirit. He must have a Zanpakuto spirit. But it seems like he can kind of run the gamut and just pick and choose almost any Zanpakuto he has to hand to use in a fight. We also see in his palace that he is surrounded by Zanpakuto spirits. Now, a Zanpakuto spirit I thought was supposed to be a very personal thing for a Shinigami, not something that Oetsu can just manufacture like on an assembly line. So are they all his Zanpakuto spirits? It's never really explained. I guess they could be, because he can freely create himself Zanpakuto over and over, perhaps. He also has the Sword Five, that group of distinct-looking women who help him to create Zanpakuto in his forge. Now, I always thought that girl, Mera, who I think has red hair, she hangs out with him the most. We see him during his introductory chapter, and she's the one who goes and gets Ichigo again. I remember reading thinking that she was his Zanpakuto, and that was what it was going to be revealed as, that the rest of them he had, I guess, just created, but that she would be his actual Zanpakuto in a fight. That doesn't happen. Oetsu, again, can just seemingly pick and choose any Zanpakuto he has ever made to use that hasn't been given to a Shinigami to use in a fight. And that's precisely what he does. He clearly chooses the Zanpakuto he thinks will be the most effective to take on the Schutzstoffel. And so we see him using a blade called Sayafushi, which he keeps basically with it suspended within a vat of a jelly-like substance. Again, this is really cool, this is super unique, and essentially the gimmick with this sword is it's a failure of Oetsu's. Again, he's a blacksmith, he creates weapons, and he considers this sword to be a failure. It's way, way too sharp, and it's way too smooth. Blood just runs right off it, it will never chip, and it's so powerful, it's so sharp, that it cleaves through basically everything in a single hit. He claims that it would put other sword makers totally out of business. It's basically like a cheat mode sword that he thought was so powerful that he could never justify sending it down to the Seirete. So it's like basically this bastardized weapon that he has no real use for, but he just leaves it in this jelly vat because he can't create a sheath for it. Any sheath he creates, the sword will just cut straight through like butter. And so he's very happy to finally get a chance to use this experimental blade of his in battle, and sure enough, we see him kill Gerard Valkyrie in a single hit, cut straight through Lil Barrow's arm and his gun, impale Pernida in the head, and then take on Askin Naklavar. And I like this, but it does leave us with a lot of questions regarding Oetsu's actual Zanpakuto, if he even has one. I like the note, because I feel like the fact that he is a blacksmith is kind of underplayed, which I know is a weird thing to say because we actually get to see him in the forge creating Ichigo's true Zanpakuto, but it does feel a little underplayed. It makes a lot of sense that as a swordsmith, he would want to bring kind of like his prized possession to the fight, and we do get to see just how good it is. But I'm under no illusion, I don't think this is his Zanpakuto. I feel like this is an Asauchi that just came out way too powerful. But maybe it is his Zanpakuto, maybe there is a spirit within it. Like I said, his palace is absolutely filled to the brim with spirits, but again, these spirits seem to have been manufactured to look the way he wants them to look, I'm assuming here. It's very hard to say, and Oetsu is a really weird one, and I kind of thought he was always gonna be. It's cool to see Sayafushi in action, the way he does actually kill basically all the Sturmwitch before they're unfortunately revived is really neat for him. But he is a really strange character when it comes to the basic principles of being a Shinigami. So going back to our principal question, does Oetsu even have a personal Zanpakuto of his own? I'm going to say yes, because if he's creating a Asauchi for all of the other Shinigami to use, to bond with, to create a pact with, I imagine he probably did it for himself at one point, and I still think it's probably that Mera girl. And I always envisioned that she would be a fire Zanpakuto, especially since she even blows the flame to create the forge. I think that would be really cool, but Again, that is speculation on my part. Now moving on, we have Korinji Tenjiro, and he's the member of the Royal Guard we get to see in action first, and so he's the one we actually get to see a Zanpakuto of, technically, first in chapter 588. Now his Zanpakuto, again in its sealed state, is weird looking. It takes the form of essentially like a massive paddle, or almost like a rowboat oar or something like that. And he can seemingly use it he basically smacks the soldat with it, but it looks like he can also manipulate his hot spring water with it as well. Now again, this is where things get really weird, because Korinji Tenjiro seems to be able to manipulate his hot spring water as a totally separate ability. We get to see him do this numerous times, where he brings in the normal water to scald the soldat when they arrive in the palace, and he summons up the blood water to rescue Oetsu from Askin. So I'm guessing this water manipulation of his has nothing to do with his Zanpakuto, which again is really, really strange. How is he doing this? I don't know. The fact that he's an inventor of the hot springs means that he can just summon water? That seems to be pretty powerful, but there's no real explanation for how he is doing it. The fact that his Zanpakuto is shaped like a paddle, like an oar of some kind, would imply that that is used as a conduit in doing this, but then he actually activates his Zanpakuto, and it seems to me to be totally unrelated. Korinji is the only other member of the Zero Division to actually give us a full Zanpakuto release command, which is Glisten or Shine Brightly Kinpika. And he activates his Zanpakuto, he pulls the sheath off the end of the oar, it's only the very tip of the paddle that he removes, again, kind of similar to Ichibei, revealing a kind of squat, flat blade underneath, and he just sort of brings the weapon forward to attack Yhwach. As he does so, as he activates his Zanpakuto, the blade itself glows, a brilliant illuminating light. And this is what I mean by it being so weird. His Zanpakuto seems to be a very rare, light-themed Zanpakuto. So, what is this Zanpakuto? If Korinji's power is to manipulate water, to manipulate his hot springs, what's the role of this? It is impossible to say. Maybe his Zanpakuto is used for maintaining the different temperature of the water. Maybe that flash is more of a heat thing. Like it's lighting up the water, it's heating it up, but the water's already boiling by the time before he has unsheathed his Zanpakuto. So there's a lot of weirdness here, and I don't know how the two correlate. Especially since we do get to see Korinji fighting with this Zanpakuto briefly. He brings it down to attack Yhwach, and he just seems to be using it as a pure melee weapon. It could be that his Zanpakuto's Shikai ability is literally to give off a blinding flash, and then after that it's just a basic weapon, but that seems a little underwhelming to me. It's definitely really, really strange that Kubo would actually show Korinji unsheathing his Zanpakuto with his foot, no less, activating it with Glisten Kinpika, only to just never ever show it again. Never tell us what it does. It's infuriating. And also that panel where the blade glows next to his face, I've always thought it's drawn really weirdly from a perspective point of view. It kind of looks like the weapon is like bending, and then there are some lights going like behind his head, but some coming out in front. It looks really strange, and I just wish we had some answers about it, because on the whole, I think he looks really cool. Now we move on to Kiryu Hikifune, who I believe is the Zero Division member to have the least amount of screen time as a whole. And I theorized, I think everyone did, way before, that her massive spoon that she has is her sealed form of her Zanpakuto, and it's only recently that Kubo, I believe, came out and actually confirmed that in a Club Outside Q&A. But what is the point of this spoon? How does it work? We have absolutely no idea. A long time ago now, I did start drawing my own version, again showing you just how much I want this scene to be fleshed out, of this fight. And in that fight, I speculated on Kiryu's abilities. She was the main character I actually got around to showing off. And I theorized in her sealed form, the spoon could almost act similarly to Neliel's ability to swallow Reiatsu. The spoon can absorb Reiatsu, and kind of power Kiryu up. And the reason for that is I predicated all of Hikifune's abilities again around her contribution to Soul Society, which was creating the artificial soul, which would eventually turn into Jikongan. And so she mentions during Ichigo and Renji's visit to her palace that her kind of speciality is taking foreign Reiatsu, ingesting it, and allowing it to power you up. And so I kind of just gave that ability to her Zanpakuto. We're really going into speculation territory here, but again, in that mini comic I did, I basically gave her Shikai, the true form of a pair of chopsticks. The first chopstick would hit the enemy very, very lightly, to the point where they would just brush it off and be like, what is this pathetic attack? But in reality, that chopstick would be absorbing that foreign Reiatsu, giving it to Hikifune, and the next hit would be immensely more powerful. As for her Bankai, I never got round to actually drawing it on paper, but I knew what it was going to be. Basically, she was going to trap, this sounds ridiculous, but she was going to trap the Schutzstaffel in a massive ramen bowl, which would slowly fill up from the bottom up with their Reiatsu as it was draining out of them. And it would eventually be something that she could, again, ingest. Of course, that is just totally my own kind of headcanon. There are a couple of little interesting tidbits about Kiryu's Zanpakuto, however. It is the first of all the Zero Division Zanpakuto we actually see. Kyurinji's is the first one we see properly actually get released. But Hikifune is wielding her enormous spoon in 521. Another interesting thing to note, again, this is speculation on my part, but I feel like there's evidence in the manga. The small spoon that she keeps in her hair, I think is probably her Zanpakuto. And I'm guessing it just shrinks down for convenience, and that is like her sheath, having it in her hair, and then she can just bring it out again. At first I thought maybe it had something to do with her ingesting and then expelling Reiatsu. Like, when she was very fat, her sword was tiny, but she would then expel Reiatsu, and her Zanpakuto would have to become massive. But we see her when she's very big in the fight against the Schutzstaffel with the full-size spoon. So again, it's difficult to say, but I do think that that is the same spoon. The one that comes out of her hair is the one she actually uses in combat. Hikifune mentions numerous times throughout that, food is life, food is power, she eats things and she creates life with her Reiatsu, so I feel like that would have to factor in somehow with her Zanpakuto's abilities, and so that's why I kind of felt like her Zanpakuto would be all about eating and digesting power, to then somehow, I guess, expel outwards afterwards. And then finally we come to the ever-mysterious Shutara Senjumaru, who is absolutely my favourite member of the Zero Division purely from a visual perspective. And Senjumaru actually gets a decent amount of screen time, decent being relatively speaking, but in comparison with the rest of the Zero Division, she's about kind of in the middle. I would say Ichibei obviously gets the most, then Oetsu, then probably her, then Tenjiro, then Hikifune. Despite this, however, I think Senjumaru is the one we know absolutely the least about when it comes to her Zanpakuto, and there's only a few things we can infer. Now, she seems to have a spider motif, she has lots of arms behind her, she weaves things with silks and stuff like that, and it's difficult to know if any of the things we see her do are her Zanpakuto at all. There are a couple of things, and the weird thing is Senjumaru actually kills a Sternritter, and we still have no idea how she does it. We know that she's the one who creates the Shinigami Shihakusho, she creates the special fabrics of the Royal Division, and presumably that's what she's doing here. Basically, when she kills Nyanzol Wyzol, we see that she has a very small, and that's crucial, sewing needle in one of her false arms, and it's attached to a thread, which is then attached to Wyzol, and somehow she has pulled this off without him noticing, but she has restitched his outfit to basically be hers to control. It is a very cool moment, to be fair, and it's also absolutely brutal when she impales him with just thousands of needles. But I don't think this is a Zanpakuto power. I think this is way more akin to Kurinji Tenjiro using his water abilities. This is more like her contribution to the Soul Society being an extraneous power that she has. She can control I guess, all fabrics to basically bend to her will. It's pretty brutal, and it's, like I said, a really nice moment when she actually takes him out. I do think we get to see the sealed form of her ZANPAKUTO, albeit extremely briefly. When Gerard Valkyrie arrives on the scene, he rushes at her, and you see her, in the background, two of her arms look like they're drawing weapons. Now, I think that there's a chance that she is a bit like General Grievous and might have 4 different blades, but we only actually get to see one of them. And I do think this is her sealed ZANPAKUTO. If you look closely, you will notice it is a massive sewing needle that she's holding, but unfortunately it is instantly shattered by Gerard. Now, I wouldn't take that to be any kind of indication of her ZANPAKUTO's power or its brittleness or anything like that, its fragility, because this whole setup is fake. We know that the whole thing turns out to be false. Senjumaru has created this fake fabric world, which again I think is more likely to be akin to Tenjiro's water than any ZANPAKUTO ability. So it's a massive shame that I think Senjumaru is the hardest one to pinpoint down anything about her, because I don't think we know anything about her ZANPAKUTO. It seems to me to take anything away from this, which I knew would be a very speculative video, but it's fun to theorize all the same. To take anything away from this video, it seems to me like the Zero Division have 2 sets of powers. They have their normal Shikai, Bankai, ZANPAKUTO setup that all captains have, but they also have a new power that they can organically control based on their contribution to Soul Society. Now, Ichibe's is weird because it's combined. Like, his ZANPAKUTO is all about names. Oetsu, on the other hand, I'm wondering if the living, breathing ZANPAKUTO spirits that are all materialized around him in the world they live in, which, remember, you technically can't do under very specific circumstances. You can't see someone else's ZANPAKUTO spirit unless they are training for Bankai generally, and they have actually managed to externalize it. So Oetsu has loads of ZANPAKUTO spirits just walking around, and I wonder if that is his own weird power, that he can just do that he can create living, breathing ZANPAKUTO, and that's where the Sword 5 come from. But I still theorize that Mera is potentially his actual blade. And again, Saya Fushi is just sort of a failed experiment that he felt like showing off. Tenjiro, this one feels like the most cut and dry, which is ironic because he's based on water, but his summoning of the different hot springs, that's his kind of innate ability that he has based on his contribution. Presumably the Soul King gave them these powers, I've absolutely no idea. And then we have his separate ZANPAKUTO, Kinpika, which seems on the surface to be a light-type weapon, but very difficult to say exactly. Then there's Hikifune, who again seems to have the power to basically allow people to ingest foreign Reiatsu and then get buffed from it. She can actually put that into her cooking. And again, this is all part of the way her character transforms. She goes from fat Hikifune, then expels all of her Reiatsu to go down to kind of slender Hikifune. That's all part of the weirdness surrounding her innate ability. And then we go to Senjumaru. She seems to have the power to control fabric, to bend it to her will, to create false, almost illusions, but like literally false realities. Because it's kind of weird when you think about it. The fabric that she creates to show off the royal palace must have depth, because Lille shoots the palaces from miles away, but then it turns out the wall is right next to him. So she is kind of like, again, basically dealing in illusions, and hers is the ZANPAKUTO that we really don't get to see at all, which is a bit of a shame. But that's basically it for this video on what is the Zero Division's ZANPAKUTOs, because we really have no idea, and that's the crux of this video. The main issue with this is that we just don't know. Very little has been revealed, and we can only hope that Kubo will go into this at some point in the future. I do think it's a little bit strange and coincidental that all 5 members of the Zero Division have these weird ZANPAKUTO. Like, when you consider the majority, in fact, virtually every captain in Bleach has a normal ZANPAKUTO, but then you get to these 5, and they all have very weird sealed ZANPAKUTO. And the reason that's a huge coincidence is because we know for a fact that characters like Hikifune were just normal captains, so where does this come from? Maybe it's something that happens when they get imbued with this additional power that we're theorizing they have. That's very likely. I think it's possible. But unfortunately, like I said, there's not a huge amount to really glean from this topic, but hopefully it was fun speculating it anyway. Maybe you think some of my ideas might be on the right track. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the individual members of the Zero Division ZANPAKUTO. Do you think I'm right in theorizing that they have two separate abilities, the normal gamut of powers a Shinigami has, plus brand new additional abilities that are now innate to them as part of their contributions to Soul Society? That's it for this video, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe. I really hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, I'll catch you later. I'll see you then.